bunker exploded at 0342 hours, and Tony Deluca stopped being a Marine with position. He became a man alone in the dark with 11 rounds and a choice: stay still and die, or move and maybe live till morning. He didn't know it yet, but by sunrise, 65 Japanese soldiers would be dead, a new doctrine would be born, and his name would vanish into silence. It was October 24th, 1942, and Guadalcanal was not a place. It was a test, a laboratory of fear and mud and blood where young men from Brooklyn and Kyoto killed each other in jungles so thick you couldn't see death until it touched you. The island had become the hinge upon which the entire Pacific War might turn. Japan needed it to protect their southern flank. America needed it to begin the long march toward Tokyo. Neither side was willing to lose. Tony Deluca had been on the island for 41 days. He was 23 years old, born in Red Hook, Brooklyn, to Sicilian parents who worked the docks and spoke English with an accent that sounded like gravel rolling down a tin roof. Tony grew up loading crates, dodging gangsters, and learning one core truth. When you're small and the world is big, you don't stand and fight fair. You move, you think, you survive. Before the war, Tony never thought about tactics or doctrine. He thought about paychecks, baseball, and a girl named Angela who worked at the bakery on Court Street. But in December 1941, after Pearl Harbor, he walked into the Marine recruiter's office on Flatbush Avenue and signed his name. His father didn't understand. His mother cried. Angela kissed him and said she'd wait. Now, 14 months later, he was 5,000 miles from Brooklyn, crouched in a muddy fighting hole on a ridge called Sector 7, part a thin line of Marines holding the southern perimeter of Henderson Field, the airstrip that was the whole reason anyone was dying here at all. For the past 3 weeks, the Japanese have been hammering the perimeter with artillery, banzai charges, and night infiltration. They came in waves, screaming, dying, and coming again. The Marines had learned to dig deep, sleep light, and never trust the silence. Tony's bunker was a reinforced foxhole carved into the hillside, covered with sandbags and palm logs. He shared it with 2 other Marines. Corporal Eddie Kurtz from Ohio, a farm boy with steady hands and a dead stare, and Private First Class Jimmy Ruiz from El Paso, who talked too much when he was nervous, which was always on the night of October 24th. They had been told to expect another push. Intelligence said the Japanese were massing forces for a coordinated offensive. The battalion commander, a hard-eyed lieutenant colonel named Puller, had walked the line that afternoon and told them plainly, "Hold or die. No fallback." Tony didn't need the speech. He'd already seen what happened when positions collapsed. He'd seen men dragged into the jungle, heard the screaming stop, found the bodies days later. Holding wasn't about courage. It was about mathematics. If you stayed in your hole and kept firing, you had a chance. If you ran, you were meat. At 2,200 hours, the Japanese artillery started. Shells shrieked overhead and exploded in bursts of white fire and shredded vegetation. The ground shook. Dirt rained into the bunker. Tony pressed himself against the sidewall, hands over his ears, mouth open to equalize pressure. Eddie and Jimmy did the same. They didn't speak. There was nothing to say. The barrage lasted 90 minutes. When it stopped, the jungle went silent, which was worse. In that silence, you could hear them coming. The first wave hit at 0015 hours. Shadows moving through the trees. Voices shouting in Japanese. The crack of rifles. The stutter of machine guns. The wet thud of grenades. Tony fired controlled bursts from his M1 Garand, picking targets by muzzle flash. Beside him, Eddie worked the Browning automatic rifle, sweeping the approach with short, deadly arcs. Jimmy fed ammunition and threw grenades into the darkness. The Japanese came close enough that Tony could see faces in the flare light, young and old, some calm, some screaming. He shot them, reloaded, shot again. It was mechanical. Survival had no room for thought. The first assault broke after 20 minutes. Bodies lay heaped 15 yards from the bunker. The Marines didn't celebrate. They reloaded, checked ammunition, and waited. The second wave came at 0125 hours. Heavier, more organized. Mortar rounds walked toward their position, exploding in sequence, each one closer. Tony felt the heat, tasted the cordite. Then a round hit the bunker directly. The explosion was light and sound and pressure all at once. Tony felt himself lifted and thrown backward. His helmet flew off. His rifle tumbled away. He landed hard on his back, ears ringing, vision swimming. Smoke and dust filled the air. He couldn't breathe, couldn't hear, couldn't see. He rolled onto his stomach, coughing, clawing at the dirt. His hands found something soft and wet. He recoiled. It was Jimmy, or what was left of Jimmy. The mortar had torn him apart. Tony scrambled forward, searching for Eddie. He found him half buried under collapsed sandbags, unconscious, blood streaming from his nose and ears. Tony tried to pull him free, but the weight was too much, and there was no time. Voices shouted nearby, Japanese voices, close, moving fast. Tony grabbed his rifle from the rubble, checked the magazine. 3 rounds left. He snatched 2 more clips from Eddie's belt, shoved them in his pocket, and crawled out of the ruined bunker into the jungle. Behind him, the Japanese swarmed the position. He heard them shouting, heard the rattle of gear, heard a single gunshot. Probably Eddie. Tony kept crawling, then moving in a low crouch, then running. He ran blind through the jungle, branches whipping his face, vines catching his legs. He had no idea where he was going. He only knew he had to move, had to put distance between himself and the enemy, had to survive until dawn when maybe someone would come. After 200 yards, he stopped, pressed his back against a tree, and listened. The jungle was alive with sound. Gunfire to the north, shouting to the west, movement everywhere. He was behind enemy lines, surrounded, cut off, alone. Tony's hands were shaking. His breath came in gasps. Fear climbed his throat like bile. Every instinct told him to find a hole, hide, wait for rescue. That's what doctrine said. That's what training said. When you're cut off, dig in, stay quiet, survive. But Tony Deluca wasn't thinking about doctrine. He was thinking about the docks in Red Hook, about the time he got cornered by 3 guys looking to collect his father's debt, about how he didn't freeze or beg. He picked up a steel hook and started swinging, moving, making them chase him through tight alleys where numbers didn't matter. He thought, if I stay still, they'll find me. If I move, I choose when and where. It was insane. It was against every rule. But it was the only idea that made sense. Tony checked his ammunition. 11 rounds total. He had 2 grenades, a knife, and a canteen half full of water. No radio. No map. No backup. He started moving. Not running. Not hiding. Moving with purpose. Angling through the jungle parallel to the Japanese advance. Listening for voices. Watching for movement. Stopping every 50 yards to observe and adjust. Within 10 minutes, he found them. A Japanese squad, 7 men, moving in loose column formation toward the Marine line. They were talking quietly, rifles slung, confident. They thought they were in safe territory. Tony crouched behind a fallen log, 40 yards away, his heart hammered. His rifle felt impossibly heavy. He had the advantage of surprise, but only for seconds. If he fired and missed, if he fired and didn't kill them all, they'd flank him, surround him, end him. He breathed, aimed, chose the last man in the column. Always start at the back so the front doesn't know. Squeezed. The rifle cracked. The man dropped. Tony shifted, fired again. Second man down. The others spun, shouting, raising weapons. Tony fired 3 more rounds in rapid succession, dropped 2 more, then rolled left behind a log as return fire shredded the vegetation where he'd been. He didn't wait. He moved, crawling fast through the undergrowth, circling wide, flanking them while they fired at shadows. They were shouting, confused, clustered together, exactly what he needed. Tony pulled a grenade, yanked the pin, counted 2 seconds, threw. It arced through the dark and landed in the center of the group. The explosion was a bright orange flash. Screaming. Silence. Tony waited 30 seconds, then moved forward, rifle raised. All 7 were down. He didn't check bodies. He took 2 rifle magazines, a canteen, and kept moving. He had 6 rounds left, and he just announced his presence to every Japanese soldier within 300 yards. The jungle erupted with noise, whistles, shouts, movement converging on his position. Tony ran, not in a straight line but in a zigzag, angling south, then west, then north, never predictable, never still. He found another group 10 minutes later. 5 men setting up a light machine gun position, overlooking a marine trench. They hadn't heard him. They were focused forward, expecting the fight to come from ahead. Tony moved close, closer than any doctrine would allow. 20 yards, then 15. He could hear them breathing. One of them laughed at something. He fired twice, dropped 2, before the others could react. He threw his second grenade. It landed between them and detonated. The machine gun toppled. The men crumpled. Tony reloaded with one of the captured magazines. 8 rounds now. He kept moving. The night became a blur of motion and violence. Tony moved like a ghost to the Japanese rear, never stopping, never staying, always choosing the moment of contact. He ambushed a supply team carrying ammunition. He shot a radio operator mid-transmission. He stumbled onto a mortar crew and killed 3 before they understood what was happening. He used the jungle itself, the darkness, the thick vegetation, the confusion. The Japanese didn't know they were fighting one man. They thought they were being hit by a squad, maybe a platoon, attacking from behind. They pulled men from the front line to hunt him. They spread out, lost cohesion, started shooting at each other in the chaos. Tony moved and killed, and moved again. Somewhere around 0400 hours, he ran out of ammunition. He was crouched in a thicket, breathing hard, covered in mud and blood. Some is, some not. He had his knife left. That was all. He heard voices nearby. Japanese. Close. Searching. He stayed perfectly still, one hand on the knife, watching shadows move through the trees. A soldier passed within 10 feet, rifle raised, eyes scanning. He didn't see Tony. Kept moving. Another followed. Then another. When the last one passed, Tony exhaled slowly, silently. He couldn't fight anymore. Not without ammunition. Not without losing. So he moved again, angling away from the voices, deeper into the jungle, away from the fight. He had no plan except to survive till dawn. At 0530 hours, the sky began to lighten. The gunfire slowed. The Japanese assault was breaking. Tony didn't know why. Didn't care. He just kept moving toward where he thought the Marine line might be. At 0612 hours, he stumbled out of the jungle into a clearing and nearly got shot by a Marine machine gun team. They screamed at him to identify himself. He croaked out his name, his unit, his serial number. They pulled him into the trench, eyes wide, rifles trained on the jungle behind him. "Where the hell did you come from?" a sergeant demanded. Tony couldn't answer. He collapsed against the side of the trench, shaking, gulping water someone handed him. His hands were black with dirt and powder burns. His uniform was shredded. He had cuts on his face, his arms, his legs. He didn't remember getting most of them. 2 hours later, a patrol went into the jungle to assess the damage. They found 65 Japanese bodies scattered across a 200-yard stretch of terrain. Ambush sites, grenade craters, evidence of close-quarter fights. No other Marine casualties in the area. The patrol leader, a lieutenant named Marsh, came back to Tony. "Did you do this?" Marsh asked. Tony looked at him, nodded. Marsh stared. "Alone?" Tony nodded again. Marsh didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, "You just invented something." Tony didn't understand. He was too tired to understand. But Marsh did. He understood that what Tony Deluca had done, moving constantly, attacking from unexpected angles, refusing to hold static ground, was the opposite of everything the Corps taught. And it had worked. It had disrupted an entire enemy assault, pulled soldiers from the front, created chaos and fear. Marsh wrote a report. The report went up the chain. Within weeks, Marine officers were studying what happened that night. They called it aggressive defense. Later, it would evolve into mobile defense, and then into Corps counterinsurgency and fire and maneuver tactics used in every jungle war that followed. Tony Deluca, the dockworker from Brooklyn who fought like a cornered animal, had accidentally created a doctrine that would save thousands of lives across the Pacific, Korea, and Vietnam. But Tony never knew. He never got a medal, never got a commendation, never got his name in the reports. Marsh's assessment credited resourceful field initiative by forward elements but didn't name him. The Corps took the lesson, refined it, taught it, but forgot the man. Tony survived Guadalcanal. He survived the rest of the war. He came home in 1945 to Brooklyn, to his parents' house, to Angela, who had waited. He got a job on the docks. He married Angela. He raised 3 kids. He never talked about the war. When people asked, he'd shrug and say he did his part like everyone else. In 1987, a Marine Corps historian researching Guadalcanal found Marsh's original field report buried in archives. It included a handwritten note in margin, PFC Duca Anthony J. Sole Survivor. Remarkable action. Recommend further study. The historian tried to find Tony. Found an obituary instead. Anthony Joseph Duca, age 68, died of a heart attack in 1984. Survived by his wife, 3 children, 7 grandchildren. Veteran, longshoreman, quiet man. No mention of what he did. No mention of the night he fought alone and changed how Marines would fight forever. War has a strange relationship with memory. The big battles get monuments. The generals get books. The heroes get medals and parades. But the moments that actually change things, the small, desperate, improvised decisions made by tired men in the dark, those often disappear. Tony Deluca didn't set out to be a hero. He set out to survive. He didn't invent a tactic because he was brilliant. He invented it because standing still meant dying and moving meant a chance. That's the lesson, if there is one. Doctrine matters. Training matters. But survival teaches faster than any manual. The best ideas in war don't come from academies or planning rooms. They come from young men trapped between death and dawn, making choices no one prepared them for. Tony Deluca fought like a ghost because ghosts don't hold ground. They haunt it. He didn't defend a position. He became the danger the enemy couldn't locate, couldn't predict, couldn't stop. And 65 men died because one refused to stay still. The Marine Corps learned. They adapted. They trained thousands of Marines in mobile, aggressive defense. They taught them to move, to disrupt, to refuse the enemy's terms. They saved countless lives with tactics born from one terrifying night on Guadalcanal. But they forgot the name. Maybe that's fitting. Maybe the best warriors aren't the ones with statues. Maybe they're the ones who do what needs doing, survive if they can, and go home to live quiet lives. Tony Deluca went home. He raised his kids. He worked the docks. He died in his sleep in a small house in Brooklyn. And every Marine who moves under fire, who refuses to be pinned, who survives because they stayed mobile, they're carrying a piece of him, whether they know it or not. War doesn't remember names, but it remembers lessons. And sometimes, if you look hard enough in the margins of old reports, you can still see the name written in pencil by a lieutenant who watched a kid from Brooklyn stumble out of the jungle covered in blood and realized he'd just witnessed something that would outlive them all. PFC Duca Anthony J. Remarkable action. Recommend further study. The thing about fear is that it doesn't announce itself like the movies suggest. It doesn't come with dramatic music or slow motion clarity. Fear comes quietly, like a cold hand on the back of your neck, and it whispers that you're about to die, and there's nothing you can do about it. Tony Deluca felt that hand the moment he crawled out of the destroyed bunker. He felt it when he heard Japanese voices 20 yards away, felt it when he realized he was alone, felt it when every instinct screamed at him to dig a hole and disappear into the earth. But Tony had felt that hand before. When he was 15, his father owed money to a loan shark named Paulie Torino, who ran debts out of the social club on Union Street. The debt was $200, a fortune for a dock worker in 1934, and Paulie didn't care about excuses or extensions. One afternoon, 3 of Paulie's men cornered Tony in an alley behind the fish market. They told him to deliver a message to his father. Pay by Friday or they'd break his hands. Tony was small, thin, no match for 3 grown men. He could have run. He could have begged. Instead, he grabbed a docker's hook hanging on the wall, 2 feet of steel with a wicked curved tip, and started swinging. He didn't fight smart. He fought desperate. He swung wild, screaming, forcing them back, making them trip over crates and nets. He didn't win, but he didn't lose either. They backed off, cursing, and Tony ran. His father paid the debt by selling his car. But Tony learned something that day. When you're cornered, when the odds are impossible, movement is the only weapon you have. Don't freeze. Don't wait for rescue. Move and make them react. That lesson came back to him on Guadalcanal. The jungle at night was a living thing. It breathed and shifted and whispered. Every sound could be wind or an enemy. Every shadow could be vegetation or death. The Japanese were masters of it. They moved silently, used the terrain, struck from nowhere. But Tony grew up in Red Hook, where the docks at night were just as deadly, where gangsters and thieves moved through shadows, where you learned to listen for footsteps on wet concrete, where you developed a sixth sense for danger. The jungle wasn't that different. Tony moved carefully, placing each foot deliberately, avoiding dry branches, pausing every few steps to listen. His breathing was controlled, shallow, silent. His eyes scanned constantly, not staring at one spot, but letting his peripheral vision catch movement. After killing the first squad, he knew he'd cross a line. There was no hiding now, no waiting for rescue. The Japanese would be looking for him, hunting him, and if they found him stationary, they'd overwhelm him with numbers. So he kept moving. The second engagement happened almost by accident. Tony was circling east, trying to get a sense of where the Marine line might be, when he heard voices ahead. He dropped to a crouch and moved forward slowly, using the thick undergrowth for cover. Through a gap in the foliage, he saw them. 5 Japanese soldiers setting up a Type 92 heavy machine gun on a slight rise. They were focused on the work, joking quietly, one of them smoking a cigarette. The gunner was adjusting the tripod. The assistant gunner was feeding the ammunition belt. 2 riflemen stood guard, but they were facing forward, toward the Marine positions, not behind. Tony assessed the situation with the cold clarity of survival. If that machine gun opened up, it would shred the Marine trench line. Dozens would die. He had maybe 90 seconds before they finished setup and started firing. He had 6 rounds in his rifle and 2 grenades. He thought, take the gunner first, then the assistant gunner, then throw the grenade before the rifleman can react. His hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. Fear was still there, but it had transformed into something else. Focused precision, the hunter's calm. He raised his rifle, exhaled halfway, squeezed the trigger. The gunner's head snapped back. He fell silently. The assistant gunner looked up, confused, reaching for his rifle. Tony fired again. Down. The 2 riflemen spun, shouting, raising their weapons. Tony fired twice more, hit one, missed the other. The surviving soldier dug behind the machine gun and started shooting wildly in Tony's direction. Rounds snapped through the leaves overhead. Tony pulled a grenade, yanked the pin, counted 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi through. The grenade sailed in a clean arc and landed directly behind the machine gun. The explosion was sharp and bright. The machine gun toppled. The rifleman flew backward and didn't move. Tony didn't wait to confirm. He reloaded, grabbed the captured ammunition magazines from the first soldiers he'd killed, and moved. Behind him, whistles shrieked. Voices shouted commands. The Japanese were organizing, converging on an area. Tony ran 50 yards south, then cut west, then angled north again, never moving in a straight line, never predictable. He was thinking like a prey animal now. Zigzag, double back, confused ascent. But he was also thinking like a predator. Because he realized something. Every soldier they pulled back to hunt him was one less soldier attacking the Marine line. Every minute they spent searching was a minute the Marines had to regroup, resupply, reinforce. He wasn't just surviving. He was disrupting. At 0315 hours, Tony found himself on the edge of a small clearing. Moonlight filtered through the canopy, casting everything in silver and shadow. Across the clearing, partially hidden by palm trees, he saw a command post. A group of Japanese officers gathered around a map, lit by a shielded lantern. A radio operator sat nearby, headset on, writing notes. Tony counted 7 men, all officers or senior NCOs. If he hit them, he'd decapitate local command. But they were 60 yards away, partially concealed and alert. This wasn't an ambush. This was a suicide run. He started to back away. Then he heard the radio operator speak into his handset. Heard the word that needed no translation. Banzai. They were coordinating another assault. Right now. And the Marines on the line had no idea it was coming. Tony looked at his rifle. 4 rounds left. 1 grenade. No support. No backup. No chance. He thought about Angela. About Brooklyn. About his father saying once, "You do what's right, even when it costs you." He thought about Eddie, probably dead in the bunker. About Jimmy, definitely dead. About the Marines in the trenches who'd die if that assault came as a surprise. Tony moved into the clearing. He didn't run. He walked, rifle raised, controlled, every step deliberate. He covered 30 yards before someone saw him. A shout, men reaching for sidearms. Tony fired, dropped the radio operator first. The radio sparked and died. He fired again. An officer fell. He fired twice more. 2 more down. The remaining 3 drew pistols and fired. A round grazed Tony's shoulder, burning. Another snapped past his ear. He pulled the grenade, threw it underhand, and dug behind a fallen log. The explosion tore through the command post. When Tony looked up, the clearing was silent. All 7 men were down. The map burned. The radio was destroyed. Tony's shoulder throbbed. He touched it, felt blood, but the wound was shallow. He reloaded with his last magazine. 3 rounds left. He heard shouts approaching from multiple directions. They knew where he was now. They were coming. Tony ran. The next hour was a nightmare of motion and violence. Tony moved through the jungle like a ghost, striking when he had advantage, fleeing when he didn't. He killed a supply team carrying mortar shells. He ambushed a medical team, hesitated when he saw red crosses, then shot past them at the guards and let the medics run. He stumbled into a machine gun nesting behind, killed 2 crew members with his knife before they understood what was happening, then disappeared into the darkness before their squad could respond. He was running on instinct now, on adrenaline, on something deeper than thought. His body moved before his mind decided. He was a predator and prey simultaneously, hunting and hunted, alive only because he refused to stop moving. Somewhere around 0430 hours, his luck ran out. He was crossing a shallow stream when a Japanese patrol spotted him. 6 men, alert, well-armed. They opened fire immediately. Tony dug behind a rock as rounds shattered the water around him. He was pinned, exposed, with nowhere to go. He fired his last 3 rounds, dropped 1 soldier, then the rifle clicked empty. No ammunition, no grenades, just a knife. The Japanese advanced, spreading out, covering each other. Tony pressed himself against the rock, breathing hard, mind racing. This was it. This was how it ended. Then he heard it. The distant thump of American mortars, the whistle of incoming rounds. The Marines were firing, dropping shells into the jungle, suppressing the Japanese advance. The patrol scattered, diving for cover. In the confusion, Tony moved. He crawled through the stream, into the reeds, then into the thick undergrowth on the far side. He crawled for 100 yards, then 200, until the voices faded behind him. He collapsed in a thicket, gasping, shaking, covered in mud and blood. His rifle was empty. His knife was all he had left. He couldn't fight anymore. He could only hide and survive. So that's what he did. Dawn came slowly, the sky turning from black to gray to pale blue. The gunfire diminished. The Japanese assault had broken. Tony didn't know why. Didn't care. He just started moving again, this time toward where he hoped the Marine line would be. He walked for 30 minutes, stumbling, exhausted, barely conscious. When he finally broke through the jungle into a clearing and saw American helmets, he almost cried. The machine gun team nearly killed him. They screamed challenges. He croaked out his name, his unit, his serial number. They pulled him into the trench, staring at him like he was a ghost. "Where the hell did you come from?" the sergeant demanded. Tony tried to answer. Couldn't. His legs gave out. He collapsed against the trench wall, shaking uncontrollably, the adrenaline finally draining away. A medic came over, checked his wounds, minor cuts, the shoulder graze, dehydration, exhaustion, nothing life-threatening. But the medic's hands were gentle, and his voice was soft, and Tony realized he was safe. He closed his eyes and let the shaking take him. When Lieutenant Marsh came back on the patrol and told him about the 65 bodies, Tony didn't feel pride. He didn't feel heroic. He felt numb. He'd killed 65 men. 65 human beings with families and lives and dreams. They were the enemy, yes. They would have killed him, killed his friends, killed everyone on that line. But they were still people. And Tony had killed them. He never talked about it. Not to Marsh. Not to his squad. Not to anyone. What was there to say? Years later, when his son asked him if he ever killed anyone in the war, Tony looked at him for a long moment and said, "I did what I had to do. That was all. That was enough." The lesson of Tony Deluca isn't about heroism. It's about adaptation. It's about a young man who found himself in an impossible situation and made an impossible choice, to move instead of freeze, to fight on his terms instead of the enemy's, to survive by refusing to play by the rules. The Marine Corps took that lesson and turned it into doctrine. They taught it at Quantico. They used it in the Pacific, in Korea, in Vietnam, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. Mobile defense, aggressive counterattack, refusal to be pinned. And it worked. It saved lives. It won battles. But the name faded. Tony Deluca became a footnote, then a margin note, then nothing. The tactics lived on, but the man who invented them in a moment of desperate terror was forgotten. Maybe that's okay. Maybe the best warriors don't need statues. Maybe they just need to survive, to go home, to live quiet lives surrounded by people who love them. Tony Deluca did that. He went home. He raised his kids. He worked hard. He died peacefully. And somewhere in every Marine who moves under fire, who refuses to be pinned, who fights smart instead of fair, there's a piece of him, the dockworker from Brooklyn who fought like a ghost and changed war forever. Subscribe if you want more untold stories like this. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. ****.